Hello and welcome to the local campaign in the Kitchener South-Hespeler debate. I'm your moderator, Dan Polishchuk. Tonight we have 5 candidates participating in our debate, and they are as follows. The incumbent, Marwan Tabera of the Liberal Party of Canada, Joseph Todd of the People's Party of Canada, David Weber of the Green Party of Canada, Wasai Rahimi of the NDP, and Alan Kiso of the Conservative Party of Canada. We also have 2 other individuals running that couldn't be here this evening, and they are Elaine Bates of the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada and Matthew Correa of the Veterans Coalition Party of Canada. Now, to start things off, candidates will have 2 minutes to deliver their opening remarks, and with that, we will begin with Mr. Tabera.
Thank you very much. My name is Marwan Tabera. I'm the Liberal candidate in Kitchener South-Hespeler. I've had the honor and privilege of serving Kitchener South-Hespeler for the past 4 years. I've lived here also for 30 years of my life, and it's been an honor to serve the constituents. I'm running because the previous government under Stephen Harper had stagnant growth, and it was getting harder for Canadians to pay their bills and to get by, so that's why I threw my hat into the ring. And I'm proud of the economic policies that we've put in place and made it beneficial for Canadians. We've created, with Canadians' help, over 1 million jobs, the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. We've lifted 800,000 people out of poverty, including 300,000 children with our Canada Child Benefit, and we want to continue to do more. And this election is about a choice. Do we want to move forward with these economic policies and positive results for Canadians, or do we want to go back to the Harper years of Stephen Harper and Doug Ford with cuts and austerity that didn't help the middle class?
Mr. Todd.
Thank you. It's an interesting time to be a Canadian. We're constantly spoon-fed a narrative of inclusivity and diversity. And although we're a very diverse country, we've never been more divided. Political correctness has run amok to the point that we're constantly walking on eggshells in fear of offending people. The level of offense in our country is killing the ability to have discussions about important issues that Canadians care about. We're told to be tolerant of others, but are called racists and bigots for simply disagreeing with policies such as immigration. We can't have critical discussions on important topics without the risk of offending someone. Being offended is incredibly subjective. Emotional maturity doesn't mean you have the right to never feel bad. What affects me may not affect you, and vice versa. It is for these reasons that the People's Party of Canada rejects political correctness. We're open to all debates. Having discussion on serious issues is more important than not having it, out of fear that you may offend somebody. Thank you.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you. I'm David Weber, the Green Party candidate for Kitchener South-Hespeler, looking to represent you and our country. I served as a police officer for 30 years, and during that time, I saw continued poverty through low wages, insecure employment, and inadequate pensions, lack of affordable housing and homelessness, lack of full and proper mental health care, which caused people with desperation to lead to self-medicate with illegal drugs, causing addiction, homelessness, and half the people in jail are suffering from mental illness, having gotten there because of the pathway we put them on with lack of support. The Green Party's broad vision green document, it's our book of policies, is online available for you to look at. It covers these things and many more. All of our policies are made by people that joined the Green Party. Anyone can do this. They put proposals forward, they're debated, and if 2/3 of the membership votes to accept them, they become policy. Our leader is simply a spokesperson for us for what we all want. She is an equal, and as a fellow MP, would have no ability to tell me how to vote. The people that would tell me what they want and what they need are those that meet me on monthly town hall meetings, and I would be representing them, the people of Kitchener South-Hespeler. I will not abandon my fight for electoral reform, which I have been fighting for before politics and in every election that I've run the last 3 times. To get better government, we must elect better politicians. On October 21st, I ask that you join me to strengthen our democracy by obtaining a fairer democratic system, and that will put people and our planet over power and politics. Thank you.
Mr. Rahimi.
Hi, my name is Wasai Rahimi. I'm a candidate of NDP party. Thank you all for joining us here today, and I want to start by saying that it has been incredibly exciting few weeks knocking on doors. I'm ready and excited to serve this community in Ottawa, and people here are ready for a change. This is an important election. People are worried about the cost of living, housing, phone bills, medicine, all add up for families haven't gotten real raise in years. And we are facing serious national issues like climate change and challenge of reconciliation that both Liberal and Conservatives haven't done enough on. The Liberals made big promises in 2015, and Canadians haven't gotten a real change they were told was coming. They have disappointed people by making life more affordable, and by not making life more affordable and making decisions that helped big corporations and not people whom they represented. At the end of their 4 years in power, young people are still struggling to pay for their educations and move into their first homes. There are still boil water advisories on reserves, and kids are still growing up in unsafe or crowded homes and schools. The Conservatives are offering up some tired Stephen Harper playbook, while Canadians aren't interested in cuts and mean-spirited politics.
Thank you, Mr. Rahimi. Mr. Kiso.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Kiso, and I'm running for the honor to serve you as your Member of Parliament for Kitchener South-Hespeler. I'm a community member, a family man, a business owner with a background in the environmental sciences, and proudly served our country in the Canadian Armed Forces. Many of the lessons I bring to my sense of service also come from my upbringing, working at my family's sawmill in Listowel. Hard work amounted to something. Yet now, every day, I'm out having conversations with the hardworking people of our riding, and what has come to truly trouble me over the past few years is that your hard work doesn't seem to matter to this government. I talk to young people who feel the dream of owning a home is lost, to working families who are struggling to meet their goals, to seniors barely breaking even, to business owners putting everything on the line to create jobs and shared prosperity. There are truths here today that need to be addressed head on. On this stage, there is common ground with other candidates who know that the story being told by the current Prime Minister doesn't match up with reality. The truth is, Canadians are not getting ahead. Canada is not getting ahead. Meanwhile, tonight and throughout this election campaign, you may hear attempts to misdirect you with non-election, divisive issues, as well as past or even an entirely different level of government, rather than having a clear discussion on the here and now. In the here and now, our Conservative team has a plan to get your dollar going further, grow our economy, take our climate change fight global, create good jobs, and make our neighborhoods safer. I am here to speak to you clearly, truthfully, and to earn the honor of serving you and our country, so that you and Canada can get ahead. Thank you.
And thank you to all the candidates again for your opening remarks. We'll move now to the question and answer portion of the debate, and questions will be posed by 570 News reporter Ash Tashetty, as well as Cambridge Chamber of Commerce President Greg DeRocher. Candidates will have 1 minute each to answer each question. Once all candidates have had a chance to respond, we will open up the debate for the topic at hand for a few moments at my discretion, but with the first question coming from Mr. DeRocher.
Thank you very much. Today the numbers came out. The GDP for July was flat, 0. Perrin Beatty, the Honourable Perrin Beatty, the President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, tweeted out, "The lack of serious discussion in this election about how to promote Canada's economic success is deeply worrisome. Instead of trying to buy taxpayers' votes with their own money, all parties should focus on what's urgently needed to build a more prosperous future for our kids." How will your party build a prosperous future for our kids?
Mr. Todd, you have the first crack at the response to this question.
Well, quite simply, we're going to put more money back in the hands of Canadians. Our tax reform bill would make the minimum income of $15,000 or less tax-free. After that, between $1,500 or $15,000 and $100,000, you would only be taxed at 15%. I did the quick math on this myself for my income, where I make about $50,000 a year. It's about $300 to $400 a paycheck extra, if not more. And if you are between $100,000 and above, you'll pay 25%. Now, this helps entrepreneurs and small business owners reinvest in themselves, their businesses that employ Canadians. That's how we're going to do it.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
There is no healthy economy on a dead planet. Being the Green Party, you're going to probably expect that I'm going to talk a lot about environmental issues. This is something that is necessary. It's not an option to take action on the environment. The Mission Possible plan that the Green Party has includes retrofitting homes to make them more energy efficient and try to get them up to speed with new homes that we need to be building at 77% more efficient than current code. This is possible and it's being done. There's home builders that are now doing these homes, showing us in Canada that it is possible. To retrofit homes and to change our economy the way we build is actually going to create a lot of jobs. We also need to build infrastructure for our renewable energy. We need renewable energy projects, but also an east-west corridor with our electrical lines. We need to make sure that we have the infrastructure available so that we can actually switch into the green economy that we need, and this will make us prosperous.
Mr. Rahimi, your response?
We make easier for families and businesses to be passed on the future generation with legislation and unfair taxes, treatment of the family transfer small businesses. Small businesses operating in rural areas will make important new investments and training Canadians to boost super traditionally unemployment groups and ensuring that they can success in creating new jobs. And also we provide pharmacare to those businesses, to employees of these businesses, that they don't have to pay extra insurance and they save money on that.
Mr. Kiso?
If we're talking about GDP in our economy, I think it's important that we look to the engine of our economy and our small businesses. If you look back a few years with our small businesses, there was some tax reform introduced during the summer a couple years ago. It was during July when a lot of business owners were taking holiday and spending time with their family. And some measures were introduced that rolled back a lot of the help that they received to keep their taxes low and to compete, not just within Canada, but outside of Canada. So those were introduced. There was a big blowback from our small business community, understandably, and we came back and we supported that. We said, look, these changes can't go through. It's going to harm the engine of our economy. And so, they spoke up. A lot of those reforms were drawn back, but some were left in and harmful. There was a tax reduction made that was proposed earlier to make up for it. But what are we going to do? We need to get the confidence back and morale back up for our small businesses. We are going to undo some of the liberal tax hikes that have been introduced. We're going to cut regulations by 25%, spousal dividends and tax hikes that we're going to leave off of spousal dividends there. So our plan is to restore the confidence of small business, let them get ahead because they're telling us less regulation, less tax, get out of our way.
Thank you, Mr. Kiso. Mr. Tabara.
Thank you very much. And GDP rates, you mentioned that in July. In Ontario, this past July, 80,000 jobs were created right here in Ontario. And if you look overall since 2015, we've created 1 million jobs with the help of Canadians. And this goes across the board from coast to coast to coast. We've had the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years, whereas the previous Conservative government had a very low growth rate, one of the lowest since the Great Depression. We are the strongest economy in the G7. We have the lowest rate to GDP. Only Germany can speak about their levels close to ours. We've also lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. And also for small businesses, we reduced their tax rate from 11% down to 9% so that they can compete, grow, expand, and scale up. We've also invested right here in our region. We've invested $110 million right here at Toyota. And that's created 450 jobs. Also, it's created 1,000 jobs. And we want to continue making these investments right here and across Canada.
Ashta, next question for the candidates.
What are some policies you're working on to address social issues like housing, homelessness, and healthcare?
And Mr. Weber, first response to you.
Dealing with housing, a lot of people are concerned with the affordability to buy a home. We're seeing plans being put forward to encourage people to be able to afford a home by paying their mortgage longer, or by being a partner with the government in buying the home, and then when they sell it, they have to share the proceeds of any capital gains with that. When we have a housing market that is already considered overvalued, to encourage people and even put more people into that housing market is only going to exacerbate the problem. What we need to be doing is what they did in BC with the Greens and the New Democrats working together to eliminate the speculation that is victimizing the marketplace, using it as capital and leverage investments. We need to have the market be for first-time or home buyers, any buyers that actually want to live in those residences, rather than major corporations gobbling up the whole entire market like scalpers outside of a concert, and then giving you your show at a much inflated rate.
Mr. Rahimi?
NDP will support the construction of affordable homes by waiving federal portion of GST and HST on construction of new affordable rental units. Also, our federal investment will begin with $5 billion in the first 2 years. NDP will build 500,000 houses in the next 10 years, while we will build half of that number in the first 5 years. To help put end speculation that fueling high housing prices, we will put in place foreign buyers tax on sales of homes to individuals who aren't Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canadian residents.
Mr. Kiso, your response to the housing affordability question.
I've been knocking on a lot of doors in recent months, actually over a year. And one issue that keeps coming up over and over is from young folks trying to buy a home. And not just that, but working families trying to buy a home. Seniors who are being priced out of their home. My wife and I, we rent our home. We have great paying jobs, but it's tough to buy a home these days. So what's our plan to help there? One, we have to fix that stress test that was introduced by this Liberal government that's made it much harder for young folks to buy their first home. We also have to extend amortization and payments out to 30 years to make it easier to afford a home and make your payments. We have to get corruption out of our housing market, whether that's money laundering or just some of the corruption that enters the market, work with our partners in industry to get that out. And we're also going to sell government land to increase supply. But this is a major issue across our riding, and I'm committed to implementing these measures to help young folks, working families, and seniors to afford a home.
Mr. Tabera, your party's response?
Right here in Kitchener South-Hespeler and Waterloo region, we have a housing crisis. The reason is because there's a 7+ year wait list to get into subsidized housing and a 2+ year wait list for seniors. This is unacceptable here in our region and across Canada. So what we've done in Parliament under the Liberal government is we put an ambitious national housing strategy of $55 billion over 10 years, and that will go to construct 100,000 new builds and 300,000 builds to renovate and retrofit other homes. Because when seniors need housing, they need it today and not 2 years from now. Previous governments have not funded housing, and this is why we're taking this ambitious target to ensure that we reduce chronic homelessness by 50% and hopefully end homelessness. Also, for first-time home buyers, we've made a first-time home buyers incentive, which will reduce the monthly mortgage for first-time home buyers. And also we've put a tax on foreign investors that are investing in our markets that are not living here in Canada.
Just to throw out a question to Mr. Weber, you indicated the relationship and so rather Joseph, let's give you the first response. Mr. Todd.
It's an interesting problem to try and fix. There is an issue with the prices in houses, but in order to make it more affordable for Canadians, you would have to drop the prices in the housing market, which would really give a bad situation to a lot of people who already own a home at the top of the market. And encouraging people to buy at the top of the market isn't a solution either. Increasing the amortization rate for your mortgage and lowering stress tests isn't exactly a great idea either. You do need to have some kind of a bar in order to be able to get into a house, unfortunately. Now, that being said, we can't really fix it without lowering the prices of homes. And how do you do that when a lot of Canadians have already bought at the top of the market?
Apologies again, Mr. Todd, for jumping into the queue, but my question begins with Mr. Weber, and you indicated the partnership essentially coming up with a framework with the NDP in BC, but how are you confident that the same framework and structure to address housing affordability can work here in Ontario and in this local riding?
This is one component of it in a national-wide strategy. We need to make sure that we don't have commodification of our housing market, which is exactly what's happened, and blown up this bubble and inflated prices to put homes out of reach, which is also, as has been pointed out, increases the tax value of these homes, and it's making people that are homeowners, especially the elderly, suffering the tax burden and getting pushed out of their homes. We also need, of course, the other components dealing with investments in affordability homes, new homes, affordable homes constructed, which the Green Party wants to do 25,000 per year, and then 15,000 to have them rehabilitated. And we want to invest in $750 million for the new, and also $750 million for rental assistance. These are things that I think people need to get by as the market. We catch up to the market, and then people can afford to buy homes without them being overly inflated in value.
And Mr. Kiso, to Mr. Tabera's point, the $5 billion over 10 years to address the housing crisis, is that enough money? And is that $55 billion rather? Is that enough money in the right amount of years? And how would you address as the Conservative representative?
We've seen experts chime in on this one, and they called out this Liberal government, saying essentially that their plan was not really working to build the number of homes that they were claiming to build, for one, and two, that the numbers that there has been built per year under this government, only in 1 year was there a slight blip that's over the last government. So all these big numbers, big dollars that are being thrown out there, they're not really hitting, they're not landing, we're not seeing them. But another part of our plan that we want to do, again, going back to the previous point, is to lower regulation. So if we can lower regulations by 25% and have a rule that for every regulation introduced, 2 have to leave. And what regulations are doing are increasing the price of homes. And in some areas, that can be up to about $300,000 for a price of a home. So if we can make an impact there as well, that'll certainly help us here in Kitchener South-Hespeler.
Anything to take away from that assessment, Mr. Farrow?
Absolutely. The Conservative candidate mentioned that it's not really working, not hitting hard here in the riding. But I want to mention to him that we've created 1,400 building units, and we've repaired them. We've also subsidized 2,200 units. So for the 3,000 plus members that now have safe, adequate housing, I think our plan is working. And I think the Conservative candidate, with him saying it's not landing, it is landing. It's landing them a safe home and a safe roof over their heads.
We'll move on to the next question coming from Mr. DeRocher.
Thank you. We all know that the minority now of the population is the climate deniers. Most of us understand that we need to do something about it. However, there's 2 of you whose parties have said you're going to abolish or abandon the completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The Canadian Chamber did a study. We're losing $18 billion a year, taxpayers are, because we're not getting our resources to Tidewater. The safest and most effective way to get our resources to Tidewater is through pipelines. What will your government do to support pipelines or not? What will you do to compensate for not supporting pipelines?
The pipeline question to you, Mr. Rahimi, to begin.
NDP defends the cost from oil spill and council suggestion to reduce supply increase oil tanker traffic by 700% and create 40 million coastal protection fund. This fund will defend wild salmon, remove directed vessels, clean up the coastal and improve coast guards, equipment and trainings. New democratic government will declare climate emergency, put in place ambitious science-based greenhouse gas reductions target, and help stabilize global temperature to raise to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
To stop you there, Mr. Kiso, your response to the pipeline question.
Yes, great question. And the importance of Canada's energy industry cannot be understated. One, for our economy. Two, in the fight on climate change. So our energy industry in our country has reduced emissions per barrel by 30%. Our energy industry has invested $45 billion in the last 5 years in renewable energy. Our energy industry is talking about how we reach net zero emissions. This is going on while in the United States, who's eating our lunch in that industry, they've just reduced standards for methane emissions, which are a very toxic greenhouse gas. So what are we going to do? We are going to get foreign influence out of Canada. So we have a lot of money coming in that's blocking and trying to stop our development. We need to get that out. We're going to repeal the Liberals' No More Pipelines bill so that we can get these built as well. And we're going to be much more upfront in our consultations with Indigenous communities and across Canada so we can get pipelines moving faster, get them built, and have shared prosperity across our country and make an impact on global emissions reductions.
Mr. Tabera?
Thank you very much. Our resources and our oil was going to majority to the United States. Practically all of our oil was going to the United States. We wanted to diversify our economy, and that's why we bought a pipeline, and we twinned it with the existing pipeline so that we can get our resources to other markets, to outside markets, whether it's in Pacific markets. We wanted to make sure that we're not heavily discounting our oil, which we were to the United States. We want to make sure that we're expanding our markets and making sure that we're getting other markets so that we can benefit from that, reinvest it in green technology, make all the profits going to renewable energy, and reinvest it so that our economy can grow and prosper.
Mr. Todd?
Well, the Liberals have bought a pipeline and mothballed it. They haven't finished the project. We're not pumping any oil out. And we need to get that to market. Canada needs that revenue. So the People's Party of Canada will absolutely build that pipeline. We will get it done, and we'll use the Constitution to do it. I know BC doesn't want it, but it's good for Canada. Canada needs the money, and we need the revenue from it.
Mr. Weber?
The amount of jobs that are in the tar sands in Alberta are dwindling, not because of the market dying as fast as it needs to be replaced with renewable energy, but because of automation. There are fewer people that are needed to actually do the work of oil extraction and shipping the product. With the expansion of the pipeline, it's going to create, according to the experts on this, maybe 50 permanent jobs. It will create some temporary jobs in building the pipeline, a pipeline that from the royalties, it's going to take us to the year 2050 to get them back, to get it paid off. And on top of that, we need to be out of the fossil fuel industry by then. We need to go to fully electric cars by 2030 for sales, in 2040 to get the gas internal combustion engines off the road. The amount of jobs that are created by going from oil wells into geothermal energy and to go from pipeline building to building wind turbines are much greater and will boost the economy way more than any climate-killing investment in fossil fuel will.
Mr. Kiso, I want to touch on a point that you made about foreign influence and getting that out of Canada when it comes to the pipelines. How are you confident in that you could do that as a MP here in Kitchener South-Hespeler, and what exactly do you mean by the foreign influence?
Yeah, so there are advocacy groups from the United States in the environmental space who are investing in our country to try to limit our energy development. Now, the troubling part with that is that as that's happening, the U.S. energy industry is booming. And as I said, they've just cut some standards on methane emissions. If our energy industry, if we can produce energy better than anywhere else in the world, we should be doing more of that, not letting other jurisdictions who are emitting more and committing human rights abuses produce energy for us. We can do more of that. We can also be energy independent by the year 2030. So we know who these organizations are, and from there we can stop them.
Energy dependent by 2030, Mr. Tabera. Do you think that's realistic?
Absolutely. We made an ambitious target to have zero net emissions by 2050, and we want to do this. And the first thing that we did was put a price on pollution. So no longer is it free to pollute anywhere in Canada. and we're making ambitious targets. British Columbia has done this 10 years ago. They've increased their GDP by 19% and lowered their emissions by 15%. And there's been dozens and dozens of European countries that have already had a price on pollution, and it's been working very well for their economy. It will work for our economy too, and we want to move to a greener future for all Canadians.
Mr. Weber, Mr. Rahimi, is that price on carbon appropriate?
The price on carbon has been said by experts and people that have won Nobel Prizes as economists to say that it's an effective way to reduce carbon emissions, provided you have an escalated cost of carbon to actually deter people's consumption of carbon and move them into greener alternatives. As for this 2050 target without a plan, I suggest perhaps maybe looking at our Mission Possible document, which says we cannot be getting into fossil fuel expansion and get into a green economy at the same time.
Mr. Rahimi?
We support the carbon tax, but not in the way that liberals have put it there, that support and give a chance to those big polluters to produce even more carbon to the air, and we are not supporting that.
Mr. Barry, you wanted to jump in there with your response.
Just in terms of the Green candidate, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Kevin Page, has said that the Greens failed on all categories of analysis. The party failed to make realistic economic and fiscal management. I mean, for a party that is, addressing climate change, I get the intent, and I support many of the things that the Green parties have put forward, and they agree with the price on pollution. But when the Parliamentary Budget Officer has said, their numbers are out of whack, they're not adding up, how can we trust this Green platform going forward?
Your response, Mr. Weber.
Well, Kevin Page is not the Parliamentary Budget Officer. He was. And 4 years ago, when we put our platform forward, he gave us a B+ and everybody else an F, including you, sir. Your party. Kevin Page is now given as a private person, a private consultant, put his opinion on the budget, largely because of the fact that some numbers have not been carried over properly for him, which is an oversight on our submission. However, the numbers are now before the current Parliamentary Budget Officer, and they are being reviewed currently, and this misperception is going to be lost, or it'll be corrected.
And Mr. Todd, you mentioned this pipeline, to your party's perspective, will be built full stop. But as a People's Party of Canada, how do you sell that to the citizens of Canada?
Well, for one, we have this consensus this seeming consensus that 97% of scientists believe that CO2 is a cause. That simply isn't the case. There's roughly 30,000 scientists across the world who have signed petitions that CO2 is not the driver of climate change, that it is not man-made climate change, that it is what's happening here. There's a lot more to it than just that. There's a varying level of factors and studies that aren't included in mainstream media, just because it counteracts the narrative of being able to tax us for the air we breathe.
Mr. Tabera, one last chance here with 15 seconds on the response.
This is what I want to tell young people for the future. There's certain politicians, like the People's Party and the Conservative Party, there's still remnants that they believe that climate change is still not real. It's a hoax. And they're still members of these parties, and we want to make sure that we're moving forward with a price on pollution. We want to protect our environment and protect the economy and protect Canadians and their jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Tabera. Very quickly, Mr. Kiesel, we have to move on.
I think we have to look at the record in the last 4 years of how this Liberal government has just paid lip service to climate change. I was at the climate strike recently, last weekend here. A lot of people out, very passionate people, and for a good reason. And it was just interesting to see how our Prime Minister and this current Liberal MP for Kitchener South-Hespeler were there protesting their own policies for the last 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Kiesel. Ashta, our next question for the candidates.
How do you plan to address the opioid crisis?
First response to you, Mr. Kiesel.
Yeah, the opioid crisis is one of the tragedies of our time, no question. Some of the families who are being ripped apart, some of the young folks who are falling into being marginalized at a very young age. Not just that, but being preyed upon by gangs and those peddling those drugs. So our plan is we want to get out there and we want to help with preventative measures to help people not go the direction, of opioids and of drugs. We also want to get very tough on these gangs who are coming into our region, into Kitchener South-Hespeler, and selling these drugs. So our plan, we have a 3-point plan for a safer Canada, goes after gangs, to make sure that they can't come into our communities. We can identify them with our sentencing, put them in jail so that they can't prey on these people who are marginalized and turning to drugs at a young age. And also, we have to work much more upstream to help people not go that direction of drug use.
Ms. Tabera, you've been front and center with this topic being your writing as of the last 4 years, so your response.
Absolutely. This epidemic has started within BC and has really spread across our whole country. And it's very unfortunate that we're seeing many numbers in deaths, not only across the country, but right here in our region. It's very tragic. And we've put in services for safe consumption sites to lower any type of fatalities. There's still much more work to be doing. I agree with the Conservative candidate on a lot of these illicit drugs are coming. Some of it is coming from Mexico. Some of it is coming from China. It's important that we invest in our CBSA to ensure that we mitigate any of this traffic drugs coming into our region. But absolutely, we have to work with the region, with the provinces, with our police chief in and around here to ensure that we get this out of the hands of individuals, and we look at serving those people that have been addicted to this horrible drug and provide them the services and help they need.
Mr. Todd.
The way you're going to solve something like that is to give more rehab than anything else. Right now, the clean injection sites on paper may make it seem as if transmittable diseases are going down, but at 3 in the morning when you have a few people in one room who are addicted to drugs and one needle, what do you think is going to happen? The more and more clean injection sites that you open up, the more and more the problem increases. It doesn't help at all. I've had a couple of addicts in my family, and I do know from personal experience, the way you help somebody with addiction is you don't placate them. You get them into a rehab and you get them help. That's what's going to solve this.
Mr. Weber?
I saw in my years of policing very strong evidence that shows there are underlying issues at play as to why people get into drugs and why they use them, that arresting them is not going to solve. Putting them in jail is not going to solve the problem. We can't arrest our way out of the poverty and the mental health and the despair that people have that lead them into drug addiction. What we do need is to realize that this is a tragic set of circumstances. It's a tragic crisis. And yes, we need to prevent, we need to educate, we need to have rehabilitation centers available readily for people that want to get the help. But there are many people right now not to that point, and they are dying. And if we will value life and try to ensure their safety so that till they get to the point where they get the rehabilitation, we need to ensure a safe supply. Most of the poisoning of the drug supply is fentanyl contamination, and the fentanyl is coming largely from China. This is something we need to address. It's a cheap, very potent drug that's being mixed in with the other drugs unwantonly, and it is killing people. We need to fix it.
Mr. Rahimi.
Drug is a huge tragedy in our country, and it is getting bigger and more every day. In NDP, we are believing that going after a drug dealer which is selling the drug in the street, and which is our past governments are doing the same thing, it is not helpful. In NDP, we believe that we can stop that if we are really committed. We can stop the drug trafficking and drug control on the high level. NDP will go after those top and big drug dealers. We stop it from there. Those people who are serving in the country, we will help them to get health care and to get out of this problem.
So as a former law enforcement officer, Mr. Weber, I just wanted to get your perspective. Do you think what Mr. Rahimi is proposing in terms of resources for the police force, for instance, and law enforcement, do you think that's the proper approach, or is it, again, continue that more of a holistic approach that you described?
It's a bigger picture, and throwing money at it towards policing is not the answer. We need to deal with the mental health, we need to deal with poverty, and as for the illegal drugs on the street that are being cut with fentanyl, we need to give a safe supply to people so that they don't die with the fentanyl poisonings. We need to first of all save their lives, and then we need to rehabilitate. The prevention is also very key, of course.
And Mr. Kiso, to your point, how do you educate folks before they even get their hands on a drug that's so readily available by all descriptions?
Helping young families. I think one big issue we're seeing contribute to a lot of issues across our riding right now, across Kitchener South-Hespeler, is an affordability crisis. And I think when you create that affordability crisis and people maybe can't find good jobs or can't find the services or the support they need, and then end up perhaps on the streets and become more marginalized. We want to prevent that from happening as well. So if we can help prop up society with different tax credits, help families. One measure we're doing is to help young families with maternity and paternal tax credits so that they can save some money in earlier years, support their families, and hopefully with a safe upbringing that kids won't turn to drugs at a younger age.
And Mr. Todd, I want to touch on a point you made, and you reflected on personal experiences as well, but for those that can't necessarily afford rehab, how do you support those individuals in the community?
Well, that's the problem. We got to find a way to make rehab more affordable for people. I'm not against personally, and that's the greatest thing about the People's Party of Canada. Outside of the party platform, I'm allowed to have my own voice. So that is something I would absolutely love to fight for. I've watched my aunt die of liver failure in a hospital in Sudbury because of drugs. It's not something I would take lightly. People do need help. We need to make more funding for rehab programs. That's going to solve the issue. It's not going to be a matter of here's a clean space where you can shoot up. That's not going to save anybody's life. That's not going to give them the rock bottom that they need to pick themselves up again. You're pushing the rock bottom backwards to death. That's all you're doing by giving safe injection sites. We need to find some way to find the money. Right now, there's very, very few places in Canada where the government will fund something like that, and that's sad.
So on the safe consumption site topic, and it has been a tenuous topic, Mr. Tabera, how do you provide support for this going forward and promote it to local citizens?
I think we have to look at this as it's a disease, right? It's similar to if someone is abusing something with alcohol, for example, we need to give them the help they need. Absolutely, fentanyl is 10 times worse than being an alcoholic or having an addiction. But we need to ensure that we're providing the services that is needed. We're working with the provinces and territories to fund this because this epidemic is only growing in number. And if we don't do anything now, it's going to continue to grow. So we need to put proper investments, proper education, proper facilities so that we can help individuals move away from this harmful drug.
Thanks for those responses. Mr. DeRocher, next question.
I want to turn to a strong and vibrant workforce. We have a skilled labor shortage, as everybody knows. I traveled around to a number of businesses in the spring of this year, and there are hundreds of unfilled jobs in Cambridge alone in small and medium-sized businesses. One thing that should be near and dear to everybody's heart is we have a lot of trucking companies in our area. One thing that's not considered a skilled trade is a truck driver. And as one owner of a trucking company said, I'll put you in a 45-foot tractor and let's see you back it down an alleyway to a loading dock. It is a skilled job. It is a skilled trade. They have to go through licensing and all of that. What will you do to help create an opportunity where immigrants can feel welcome regardless of, but more poised to the need of businesses in our community?
Mr. Tabera?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I mean, we do have a labor shortages here in Canada, in the skilled trades, in the high-tech sector. I remember when the previous former Minister of Immigration John McCallum, came to our region. The high-tech sector said that the skilled trades in high-tech workers, there's a shortage. So what we did was it took around 2+ years to bring in a high-tech worker from overseas. We implemented the global skills strategy in my Citizenship and Immigration Committee, and now it takes 2 weeks to bring in a highly skilled technical worker here. Also, we've ensured that we're bringing in more economic migrants to fill in these gaps, whether they're skilled migrants through the Express Entry program. We want to ensure that if there's gaps in our system and Canadians need to fill these jobs and boost their productivity, we want to bring in these skilled migrants and immigrants as well to our region to work and grow our communities and our businesses.
Mr. Todd, your approach to increasing or filling the gap of the skilled labor shortage in this riding?
Well, currently talking about immigration numbers as in regards to the workforce. Right now, currently, we only take around 26% of immigrants as actual economic immigrants. the People's Party wants to make that stat more or less 75% to 100. So we want to make sure that the immigrants that we're taking in are skilled immigrants who have a job when they get here. So they're not dependent upon the system and dependent upon taxpayers in order to survive.
Mr. Weber?
If I heard Greg correctly here at the end of his statement, he was asking how do we make immigrants here feel welcome and included into the job market. And I think that to respond to that, first of all, ending the temporary foreign worker program and switching to a gateway to citizenship, encouraging them to have a permanent residency and giving them an opportunity for that is a good start. We also want to ensure that people that come are readily aware of the fact that what their credentials are and whether or not they're reciprocal here or accepted here. And we need to have professional accreditation, or professional organizations look to the accreditation certification of these workers where it's appropriate, and to encourage that to be accomplished when it isn't exactly equal. And to do that, we need to have greater funding to increase people's ability to improve their education, and that would include ESL funding so that people can be understanding English and integrate into our communities well.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mr. Rahimi.
New Democrats will work with provinces to create more jobs and provide more funding and training and invest on the labor market that to help and create more jobs for people, that those immigrants who are skilled and they come from other part of the world, they don't feel that they are not belong, and also they are able to find adequate job and pay taxes to our economy.
Mr. Kiso.
I've been talking to a lot of businesses across our riding, and they're trying to create jobs, and they are creating jobs. And I'll just quickly take issue with what the Liberal candidate said here, that our government's created 1 million jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. Our risk takers, our small business owners, the engine of our economy creates those jobs. But what they're telling me is one of the biggest issues they face is they can't find the people to fill jobs. So what we've done within our immigration plan is we want to tie immigration more strongly to our economy. We don't believe in the idea of picking an immigration number and saying that's what we're going with. What we believe in is we're going to work with the provinces, partner with them, and ask them, what do we need for immigration to make sure we can fuel our economy and bring in skilled people. We also want to provide English training, very much similar to David Weber and the Green Party. We also believe that we need a pathway to Canada for temporary foreign workers coming in to help our small businesses out as well, and make sure that we get the abuses that happen out of both sides there, and also invest in our trades in our colleges and partner with our colleges. We have a great one locally in Conestoga College who's trying to do just that and fuel our economy as well.
Hey, Mr. Kiso, some overlap there, Mr. Weber, but your response.
Yes, thank you. I know that Mr. Tabera and the Liberals can address this themselves, but having said that, when Mr. Kiso had made the statement that the government doesn't create jobs, I would like to just clearly state that the decisions that government makes can either foster an environment for businesses to succeed and to create jobs, or it can suffocate them. When we make a green plan of retrofitting all of our leaky carbon-using homes and make them more energy efficient, when we actually create all the jobs for infrastructure, for the renewable energy sector, this creates enormous employment. And this is a decision that government makes, and it has impacts.
Mr. Tabera, your chance to respond here.
I would have to agree with the Green candidate. You know, the government creates an environment for jobs to be successful and businesses to be successful. But also to the Conservative candidate, he said we want to tie immigration to our economy. But previously, the previous government had a 4-in, 4-out rule, which is for temporary foreign workers. They'd come in, work for 4 years, and then they'd have to leave Canada for 4 years. And then they would have to repeat that cycle again. So if he wanted to tie immigration to our economy, why did the previous Conservative government have that rule in place?
Mr. Kiso, the response to that.
We've been conducting consultations across Canada now for the last couple of years. Our MP, Michelle Rempel, has been leading those. And one thing she found from a lot of feedback from our small business community and those helping to integrate new immigrants coming to the country is that we do have to focus on a pathway to Canada. That's something that we've learned, that's something we're focused on, and something we've got built into our plan. And then I'll focus just real quick on David's point from the Green Party on enabling or suffocating, and what we're being told by our small businesses as well is they're being suffocated with higher taxes, higher regulation, and they want government to get out of their way. So what we've proposed is lower taxes, 25% cut to regulations to make sure that we don't have that suffocating effect to our small business community.
I see you, Mr. Sparrow, we do want to get one more question in, and with that, with the limited time that we do have, we're going to limit each candidate's response to 30 seconds. But Ashta, our final question of the night.
What kind of supports will your party have in place for the LGBTQ community?
And Mr. Todd, first response to you.
Like Maxime Bernier said in another interview about helping immigrants in Canada, about helping the Muslim conservative population in Canada. We'll do nothing for any group. We're not going to do anything for the Islamic group. We're not going to do anything for the Jewish group. We're not going to do anything for the LGBT group. We're going to do everything for Canadians. We're all one. I don't understand why we constantly sectionalize each other off like this. This political correctness needs to end. This is the reason why. We're going to tribe mentality, and we're starting to break off instead of actually being together as one another.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. Mr. Weber?
Talk about going into tribe mentality. No, we unfortunately have too much of that already. There is division, there is separateness, there is putting people in boxes, there is discrimination, there is hatred. Until such a time as that doesn't exist, I will march in gay pride parades. I will speak up for the LGBTQ plus community. We need to do this because people are being beaten up. They're being ostracized. They're being demeaned because of differences in that regard.
Hey, Mr. Weber, Mr. Rahimi.
And NDP believes that we all are Canadians, no matter what kind of personal orientation we would have, we must feel belong. Therefore, we are a supporter of any Canadians and whoever their lifestyle would be. We want them to be free and they feel belong to as a Canadian.
Mr. Kiso.
Our party very much believes in equality for all. Personally, I'm very supportive of our LGBTQ community. Some of my best friends are in the community. I've got volunteers that are working for me on my campaign, and we've got candidates in the LGBTQ community. So our party is very supportive. And I'd echo David's point. I'd be proud to join one of my friends in a pride parade in March.
Mr. Tabera?
It's still unfortunate that the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't want to march in the pride parades with the LGBT community. And we've seen a video that he doesn't believe that there should be same-sex marriage or that they should have the same rights as you and I would have. And I would just like to say to the Conservative candidate, you're standing behind that type of leader in this type of year, 2019. It's very unfortunate. This is not the kind of Canada we want to see. We want to see diversity, we want to see inclusion and equality for every citizen here in Canada.
We have to move on because we are very short on time, like I was saying, so we will wrap up this question or answer portion of our debate. We will now begin with our closing statements from each of our candidates. Again, each candidate has 1 minute to deliver their closing remarks, and with that, we will begin with Mr. Kiso.
To my neighbors across Kitchener South-Hespeler, we face a pivotal election. A current Prime Minister who will continue to raise taxes, suppress our economy, spend away our futures, and embarrass us on the world stage. A current MP who votes with Justin Trudeau every time, even when it cuts helpful tax credits, sets our small businesses back, and opposes federal support for the autism community. Or a new Conservative government that helps you keep more of your hard-earned money, empowers our economy, and ensures a sustainable future for Canada. A member of Parliament who fights to get your dollar going further, stands up for small businesses, and works across party lines and levels of government for progress for all. This October 21st, I ask for your support and your vote. As your member of Parliament, I won't be outworked for you, for our communities, our economy, and for environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Mr. Rahimi.
I fight for the right of workers because I am a worker. I fight for the climate change disaster because I have children and grandchildren and I'm worried for their future. I fight to tackle housing crisis because I live in a rental home 40% of my income goes towards rent, and I really, I hardly make it to the next paycheck. I fight for the right of indigenous because I have too many indigenous friends. I'm hearing their stories and I see their sufferings, and I don't want them to suffer anymore. I fight to make life easier for all Canadians because I'm one of those people. As my English is the fourth language that I speak, I may not be speaking that charming, but it doesn't mean I'm not a person can organize and talk for you.
I have to jump in there, Mr. Rahimi. I apologize. Mr. Weber.
I've heard many pundits and editorials comment that right now the two big parties are two parties and one choice, or essentially one choice and two parties. We really need to get outside of that and realize that there are other options. Whatever government we have after October 21st is going to be much better with Greens at the table, speaking up for other ideas, both for better social, fiscal, and environmental policy. I ask that on October 1st you join me in strengthening our democracy by electing individuals such as myself that will fight with honesty, with ethics, and with caring leadership to ensure that we have a healthy planet with a strong economy that's based on green principles. I'm asking you to support me, David Weber of the Green Party.
Mr. Todd.
Thank you. The People's Party of Canada is the newest party in Canada. Within a year, we've gone from nothing to 41,000 members. And this is for a reason. We're the fastest growing party in Canada. We exist because Canadians need a change. Like myself, the majority of our party and candidates are working class people. We're not politicians. We're aware of the issues facing the majority of Canadians because we're facing them too. Like many Canadians, we're fed up with the back and forth from the Liberal and Conservative governments. It's been this way for decades, and it's Canadians who have suffered because of it. Nothing ever gets done, and nothing ever changes. It's the same old back and forth, always passing the buck from one to another. If you want real change, substantial change, vote for the PPC this coming October 21st. Thank you.
Mr. Tabera.
This is a very important election. We have a choice to make. Do we want to continue moving forward, or do we want to go back to the dark days of Stephen Harper and Doug Ford with all his cuts here in Ontario? We want to move forward by creating 1 million jobs like we have since 2014, raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians while lowering it on the middle class. Our focus has been always on the middle class and those working hard to join it. And we've continued this, and with Canadians' help, we've done excellent. We've have so many exports in and around the world. I've been working very hard as your member of Parliament here in Kitchener South-Hespeler to drive that growth. And I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to be your strong voice in Ottawa, to stand up for the middle class, to stand up to those that deny climate change, putting a price on pollution like our party has done. We want to take action on climate change. We want to grow our economy, and we want to do it hand in hand together. And on October 21st, I ask for your vote again. Thank you very much.
And thank you again to our candidates, our panelists, and for you for tuning in at home. October 21st, make sure to vote and to tune into Rogers TV for live results. Have a good night.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Enjoy your vacation.
You have talents and skills. Mostly though, you're a blank key. You have the potential to open many doors.
Saving the world requires sacrifice. Sometimes people die.
Are you going to step up or not?
But I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hey!